So this time around, we want to work with layouts that allow us to simplify our templates. And if you look in your templates folder, right now we have two. About, which looks like this. Let me hide the terminal. And home, which looks almost exactly the same. And this information at the top and this little bit at the bottom, these are the things we want to have exist in one place and not on every single page of our site. The rationale for this is pretty straightforward. If I need to make a change to the top of the site, like here, for example, I'm importing the Bootstrap CSS. If I wanted to use some other CSS, I don't want to have to change it on every single page of the site. That's just extremely time consuming. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file in the templates folder, and we're going to call that, it's just a file, we're going to call it base.layout.tmpl. And it is important that you have this middle part, layout, okay? I would actually use the TMPL extension. You can use HTML or whatever you want to, but TMPL is the standard, at least in my world. So I'm going to create that, and it's a new empty file. Then I'm going to copy everything from the home page. I'm going to copy all of it, and I'm going to paste it in here. And then I'm going to add a couple of things. At the very top, I'm going to create a new blank line, and I'm going to, in double curly braces, I'm going to say define, and then in quotes, base. And then at the very bottom of this, right after the closing HTML tag, I'm going to put in double curly brackets, end. Okay? And then just to make things format nicely, I will indent everything in between. All I've done here, and this is something you're going to become very familiar with, is I've used inside those double curly braces directives that are specific to Golang templates. So before these were added, this was just an HTML file. There was nothing special about it at all. It was parsed as a Golang template where it looked for these double curly braces and things in between them to do things. Didn't find any, so it just served up the HTML file. And all I've done here is define everything between this tag, define base, and this tag, end. I've said everything in between that is defined with the name base, and it's going to be a layout, okay? Now I'm going to add some other things in here. Clearly I don't want this is the home page on every page of the site. In fact, I'm going to delete everything between those body tags. I'm just going to delete it. And I'm going to put a little directive in there. And that directive is a block, a content block. Block is my directive, and the name is content. And then this seems odd, but I'll explain it to you. I'm going to put a period after that. So there's an opening block tag, and now I'll put a closing block tag, which is basically nothing more than the word end. So I've just defined a section in this layout that says to the it says to Golang, what will you see between this opening block and this end statement? This will change on a per template basis. I might have content I want to stick in there, and that content might be just HTML, in which case I wouldn't need this dot. More often, it's going to include data that I pass from my handlers to the template renderer to render on the template. And all that dot means is include whatever data you have with this template and send it to this block so we can use it if it has to. Now I've defined that, and just to make things simpler, because I'm going to use this later on, I'm going to define two more blocks. Up in the top, I'm going to define a new block, which I'll call CSS, and I will pass it data as well, and then I'll have an ending tag for it, end. And down at the bottom, just before the closing body tag, I'm going to have another block called JS for JavaScript. And again, I need a closing tag. Now the reason I'm doing this is that it's entirely possible, block.js dot, I want to pass it data as well, it's entirely possible, in fact likely, that I'm going to have some custom CSS for one page, but not for another. And this gives me a place to put it. That's the only reason it exists. It's also extremely likely that I'll have some JavaScript which is specific to some pages, but not others. And this gives me a place to put it. So all I've done here is to find a template, a layout for our templates that says, here's the base template. Everything might have a CSS entry, it might have a JavaScript entry, and it might have a content entry. And I can save that. So now I've created this template. The obvious question is, how do I use it? Well, to start with, let's go back and say, simplify our homepage. Now this part here, from div container and to the ending div and all that stuff in between, that's the only content I want on this template. I don't want the rest of it. So I'm going to copy that just so I have it. And then I'm going to select all of this text and delete it. And I'm going to start this template with a directive, a Golang template directive. And it's simply the word template. Use this template. Use the template called base and include the data that's passed. And then I'll have an end. Actually, you don't need an end for that one. I'm going to delete that just so I don't confuse you. This is a simple directive that's not closing. This just says, it has no closing tag. It just says, use the template named base. And this word right here, base, corresponds to this word in base.layout.template. So now I've defined that. And what am I going to have in here? Well, I could have define, and I want to define content. And it has a closing tag. And in between those, I'll paste what I copied a few minutes ago. So now look how simple and short this template is. It says use the base template, and anywhere on that base template where you find a block name content, put this content. And the fact that I have the dot here means that my data is available for the entire template. So that's all that I have to do for that. And I can do exactly the same thing for base layout or for about page. So I come in here, I find the things that I want to be specific to this. I cut it, delete everything, say use the template base and pass the data to it. And then define content, paste in my HTML specific to the about page and close that define tag, end. Now that is a lot less HTML to maintain on a per page basis. So I've defined this base layout, I defined the home page, and I defined the about page, but if I run the application right now, which I'm going to, so go run command web star.go. There's only one file, so I could put main.go, but I like to get in the habit of going star.go because I know I'm going to have more files in there later, and run it. Then switch to my favorite web browser, open up a browser window, and go to localhost 8080. Well, that didn't seem to work very well. What's in there? If I view the source on this, I'll just go view source. There's nothing in there. It's empty. Why? Well, because although I've told this template for the home page, so let's find home again, I've said, use the template base. Well, it can't find the template base. And if I look down here in the error messages in the console, in my terminal, it says error parsing template, template home page TMPL, no such template base. I need to actually tell Go how to render this template, that I'm using layouts. And that, fortunately, is not all that difficult. So how are we going to do that? Well, we already know we have a package here called render, right? And inside of that is where I actually render the template. So name starts with package name. Well, that's okay, I don't mind that. How do I actually make this thing do what I want it to do? Well, let's think about this for a minute. So what I need to do is something more sophisticated than simply saying, go to the templates directory right here, find the template with that name and render it. I actually need to somehow tell it, find all of the pages in this folder, whatever they may be, find the layouts associated with them, and combine those into a template that I can actually serve. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new function, and I'll call it render template test, just so I don't overwrite what I have already. And I'll give it my response writer and give it my TMPL string, so the same arguments, and I'm going to do things a little bit differently. To start with, I'm going to create something that you may not be familiar with. It is a Golang map. It's just a data structure. Some people call these associative arrays in PHP. That would be the closest corresponding thing in PHP. This is just a data structure that holds whatever I tell it to hold, so I can look up things very, very quickly. So I'm going to do that by creating something I'm going to call a cache. What I'm going to create is a template cache that holds all of my templates, and it creates it at the start of the application. So I create a variable, my cache, and I'm going to assign that the type of map string, and then I'm going to put in a pointer to template. And I need to close that with opening and closing curly brackets, which is pretty straightforward, okay? So that is something that I've just created. My cache is a map string template. All right, so what am I going to do with that? Well, the first thing I need to do is to tell it, you need to go and get all of the files at a particular location, okay? So how do I tell it to do that? Well, first of all, what am I going to get? I'm going to go get all of the pages, all of the things in this template folder that actually have the name page in there. So before the .tmpl, I have a page. Let's go get those. So pages, I'm going to go get those. And error, I'm going to be checking for errors, is going to be assigned, and this is a built-in function found in Go, filepath.glob. Strange name, glob, but it actually kind of makes sense when you think it through. And I want to find everything that exists in /templates and then star.page.tmpl. Now, all that really does is say, go to the templates folder, find the templates folder that's at the root level of my application, and get all of the files that start with anything, but definitely end with .page.tmpl. So this is going to select about.page.tmpl and home.page.tmpl. And then I'll check for errors, okay? So if error is not equal to nil, then I want to do what? Well, what do I want to do here? Let's return an error. So we'll return an error, which means up here I have to say it returns the type of error, okay? And it's not called error, it's called ERR. Try that again. ERR. All right, so now I've got my pages. I haven't done anything with them yet, so I've got to do something with it. So now I'm going to use another control structure that you haven't seen yet. You may have seen it if you've done some work in other programming languages, but you haven't seen it in Go. It's a for loop. And the way that for loops work in Go is really straightforward. For, and then the first thing would be index, which I'm going to get rid of in a minute, but this is for index and then page, that's just a name that I'm giving it, is assigned range through pages. And then I do something. So I have two things that are happening here. For every page that I find, I am going to get the index, and the first time through will be 0, and then I'm going to get the actual page itself. Well, the page that I get here is a collection or a selection of all the files that is found in this variable pages. So it might find about first, therefore I will equal 0, the first iteration, and page will equal about.page.tmpl. And then the second time through, this will go to 1, because we start counting at 0 in for loops. And the second value would be home.page.tmpl. It will not include base.layout.tmpl because, well, it doesn't end in page.tmpl. Now, when I do this, what am I going to do when I start looping through this? Well, I've got this information. The first thing I need to get is the actual base name of the page, because what it's returning here is actually not just about.page.tmpl, it's turning the full path to that. And what I want is returning the full path to that. And what I want is the actual name of the page. And I can get that by saying name is assigned filepath.base page. All right, so now I've used this page variable, and it's used here. And from that, I've extracted the actual name, which is just about.page.tmpl. I don't want the index. I'm not going to use it. So I'm actually going to say, don't do anything with the index. Now that I have this name, what do I want to do with it? Well, I'm going to create a template set. And a template set, it sounds ever so complicated. It's not. All I'm going to do is create a new variable, ts for template set, and I'm going to check for an error. That's assigned the value of template.new, and the name I want to use for that template is the actual name I just extracted, name. And then I want to give it funcs. This template might have some functions, and I'm going to give it a word functions, which we haven't defined yet, but don't worry about that. And I want to parse files page. Wow, that's a lot of text. But what is it actually doing? Well, first of all, let me just do this. Copy this error, check, and paste it here. Okay. What's this functions? Well, we haven't seen that, what that actually is yet, but it is something that I am going to use. Okay. what I'm going to do up here is outside of this function and outside of that function, just after the import statement, is I'm going to create a new function, okay? A new variable. I'm going to call it functions, and all it's going to do, it's equal to template.funcmap. We'll be seeing this shortly. I'll explain it in a moment, but let's get it typed out first. And it's going to be empty, okay? It has nothing. So I've created a variable called functions. It's of type template funcmap. What does this do? Well, a func map is nothing more than a map of functions that I can use in a template. I am going to, at some point in this course, need to do something in a Golang template that is not built into the language. Maybe I want to format a date. Maybe I want to return the current year. Whatever it may be, it's not built into the templating language. But Go allows us to create our own functions and pass those to the template. We don't have any yet, but we'll get some later. Let's just set it up right now because we know we're going to use it. So now I've created my template set based upon this page. I've passed it an empty variable functions that will eventually have some functions in there that we can use. I've checked for errors. So far so good. What happens next? Well, first of all, we need to find out, does this template match any layouts? In other words, should I use a layout that's defined for this template with this particular template, okay? So we're going to check and see if it matches something. So let's look for the existence of any layouts in this particular folder called templates. And we can do that by saying matches. That's a variable that I'm picking. I just like it because we're checking to see if something matches. Again, we'll check for an error, and that's going to be assigned the value of, once again, this glob thing, filepath.glob. And we're going to look in the folder /star.layout.tmpl. So that's going to say, look for anything, any file in that directory specified here, which is actually supposed to be /templates. Try that again. Templates star. Look in the templates directory for any file that ends in layout.html. And if you can find one, we're going to do something with it. But first, let's check for errors to make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to. Because maybe I had a typo in here where I left a letter out and I can't find the necessary directory. But whatever, it's good practice to check for errors. Then we're going to look at this variable matches. If there's at least one thing that it finds in there, then the length of matches will be greater than 0. So I can say, if len, which is a built-in function in Go, matches is greater than 0, then I want to do something. And what do I want to do? Well, I want to actually, again, go to my template set, which I've already created, check for an error, and I want to parse that glob. So parse glob. And it's going to be, once again, just the path to the templates. Templates, layout, tmpl. We're going to parse it. We'll check for errors once again. If there's an error, just return the error. So we've parsed it now. And what do we do with it next? Well, we're all set for right now for that part. All we need to do at this point is to take that template set that we've just spent all this time creating, and we need to add it to the cache that we created up here. We're finally going to use this map we created. And the way that it works is very simple. My cache name, which is the actual name of the template, equals the template set I just created. So I've got that. I've created it. And now, because I have a function here, return nil. So I've gone to all this trouble of creating render template test, which is going to become render template in just a minute. And let's go through this again. What I've done is create a map. And a map is just something I can look up a value in very quickly. This happens to have a string as its first parameter, the map index. And I'm using for the index the name of the template in question. So when I run this, my cache will actually have two entries. The first one is called about.page.tmpl, and the second one is called home.page.tmpl. So that's how I can look things up. And when I look it up, it's going to give me a fully parsed and ready to use template. So and it's actually a pointer to a template, but same idea for our purposes. When I need to render a template, I need to have access to this cache. And I need to be able to do that in some way that kind of makes sense. Now, if you look at the way I've built this variable right now, I've actually got this scoped so it only exists within this particular function. And that's not very helpful. So maybe I should return that as well. So let me put brackets around this and return two values. And the first value I'm going to return is exactly what I have right here. A map string template. So let's get that and paste it in there. And we don't need this after it, of course, because we're not actually, this is how we're referring to the type. This is just a type. It's a map with an index of string, and the contents are going to be a pointer to template, and we're returning error. And here, we can just return that before the error, so it will compile. Return that before the error, so it will compile. Return that before the error. One more time. And down here, if everything works the way that it's supposed to, I can now return this cache. All right, so we've got this function. It's all set. It's going to go through and parse our templates and return something. Well, let's test it and make sure it actually works. So what I'm going to do, for just the sake of argument, to make sure this works, is I am going to, every time I render a template, I'm going to create that template set. So I'll put in here template cache. I'll call it template cache, and error is assigned render template test, and that takes arguments. It takes a W, and it takes we don't even need that template string. Let's get rid of that. Let's just leave it at W right now. We're not using the writer at the moment, but we will later on. And we'll just check for errors. So I'm going to copy an error check down here. I'll just type it out. It's not going to take that long. If error is not equal to nil, format.println error getting template cache and the error. All right, so that's it. And actually, I'm not doing anything with that right now, so I better just do this instead. There. All right. And now, because we have an error in two places, I don't need to initialize it twice. So in theory, if I actually run this code, just hit a page on the web browser, it's going to execute this. But I want to make sure it's actually doing it. So what I'm going to do here is put another format.println page is currently, and then page. So what's going to happen when every time I hit a page on the website, it's going to call render template to render it. Then it's going to execute this code, which I just have here just to demonstrate that it's actually building a template cache or finding out if it's not. And every time you render a page, this function gets called down here. It will create our map. It will go through, find all the necessary pages in the templates folder. And then it will loop through that arrange for those pages and print out the name of the current page. And then it'll return a template cache if there are no errors, which we don't use at the moment. But let's try this out and see if it works. Okay, so let's compile it. Good, and I'll hit enter a few times just to get blank lines. Go back to this page, reload that page, and come back here. So it said, look at the error parsing template. That's the error we saw last time, so we can ignore that. But it actually found the about page, and it found the home page. So that's exactly what I need. Perfect. So let's go back to our code here. Stop this down, or shut this down. So I'll stop the application. And think about what we're going to do next. What I need to do is somehow to get my cache and use that to render a template. How am I going to do that? I think this is long enough for one lecture. Let's break this one up into two. And in the next one, we'll actually make our template set, our cache of templates, make that usable and show pages using that nice layout we created at the start of this lecture. All right, I'll see you in the next one, and we'll actually make this thing work.